Under firmware, you'll see avatar, and you'll see Gimbal, Gimbal firmware. You'll want to download both of those if you have the Gimbal and the Walksnail. And then once you get to once you get that downloaded, you will see this is the gimbal, this is the avatar. I've downloaded both of those. You'll have to unzip it. It'll be in archived in zip files, but you can unzip them to your downloads folder or wherever, desktop. And then once you open up the avatar folder, you'll see a firmware folder here. You'll see a bunch of other folders. Open the firmware folder, and there will be a whole list of files. I've deleted everything except for the ones that I need. So the ones that I'm using is a Moonlight Sky transmitter and camera. So that's one I'm using. Yours might be slightly different. To find out which one you need, there's a README file here. If you open the README file, it's actually a JPEG image, and you will see a list of all the devices, and the name of the file will be underneath it. This is mine. It's going to be Avatar Light GND, and then the version number. So I'll go ahead and use that Avatar Light GNT 384313. And then there's the for the transmitter, it's going to be Avatar Moonlight Sky. And again, that was also in the this is mine right here, Avatar Moonlight Sky. I've got the Moonlight camera with transmitter. There's other transmitters over here as well, so yours might be over here. Okay, now we are going to upgrade the firmware for the head tracking module that's inside this goggle headset. Now this is not the firmware for the goggles. There's two different firmware updates. One's for the head tracking and one's for the goggles. We're doing the head tracking right now. So we've got the cable that runs from the upgrade module that goes to your USB port on the computer, plugs into that module, and then the other end plugs into your goggles, and then you plug your power in to power your goggles up. And then once this is booted up and we see your on-screen display on the screen here, we'll know it's ready for update. You get past these splash screens. There should be one more splash screen. There it is. And then once that goes away, we should be ready to go. Here we go. Alright. Then go to your PC or your laptop, whichever one you're using, and open up the firmware that you downloaded from their website. There's going to be two folders. One's the avatar, one's the gimbal. Even though we're installing the firmware on the goggles, it's gimbal related, so it's going to be in the gimbal folder. Double click on the folder, and we get the head tracking right there. Double click on that, and now we've got a software and a firmware folder. The software is what we're going to use to update the firmware file that's inside this folder right here. So we'll go ahead and double click on the folder there and double click on the exe file. That will open up this program here. It should automatically detect the goggles and assign a COM port to it. In this case it's COM port 6. It may be different on yours. If you have more than one COM port, just use the one that shows up. If it doesn't work, choose another one until we get feedback. When you hit start debugging, you'll see feedback from the goggles here. All these numbers will oscillate, and you'll see some action over here on this line. So if you don't see that, change to a different port and then hit debug until you see that. Alright, now we're going to open up the firmware file. Click on open. Right now we're in the software folder, so we need to go back one folder. Alright, we're in downloads, CADDX, Gimbal, head tracking, and now we're going to the firmware folder, not the software. And there's the firmware file right there. Double click on that. You will see firmware open successful at the bottom here. Now go ahead and click on the upgrade. You'll see a progress bar along the bottom here. Once that gets all the way to the right, it will be completed. There you go. Firmware update successful. And that completes the firmware update. Now to test this to make sure it's working properly, all we need to do is go up here and hit debugging again until you see those numbers start to oscillate. And then grab your your goggles device, and you will see the camera on the screen move as you rotate and tilt the goggles. So that way you can see that it's actually working. Alright, that's it for the head tracking update. Okay, to update the firmware in the gimbal, I've got the small wire hooked up to the side of the gimbal plug, hooked to the USB upgrade port, plugged into the PC USB port, and now I'm going to power up the gimbal using a 3S battery. Okay, the gimbal powered up. Now I'm going to go to my downloads folder, open up the GM Gimbal firmware, open up the GM Gimbal folder, open up the Gimbal config. That's the software that installs the firmware that's in this folder right here. Open that. Double click on the exe file. And I will choose a COM port, maybe COM port 6 in this case. And then we'll click on Start Debug. Then click on Open to open the firmware file. And we are in GM Gimbal firmware version 3.4. That's the correct folder. Double click on this file here. It should say down here, parameter download successful. Click on upgrade. And watch the progress bar at the bottom. Once the progress bar is complete, we should get a successful update notification down there where it's saying firmware upgrading. Take a few seconds. And there it is. Upgrade successful. So we are done with the gimbal. Okay, now we're going to install the firmware onto the goggles. This is not the head tracking software, this is the firmware for the goggles themselves. So you want to get the, in my case it's the Avatar Lite. Again, check yours to make sure you're getting the right file with the README file. So all you do to do that is copy the file to your SD card. So I'm going to hit that and hit copy. And then go to, I formatted the card and called it goggles so I can identify it easier later. And just go ahead and paste that into the folder. And then we'll go ahead and eject that and put it into the goggles. And once you see the, once it's already booted up, once you're past your splash screen here, you'll get a small needle of some sort and push the pairing button right here for 8 seconds, and then you'll hear it beep and you'll see it reboot. When that happens, you'll go into the setup. Okay, so I'm going to hold it here, push, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, you hear that beep? Let go of it. It will reboot. and then it should go right into the update. There it goes. And it will beep like this until the file is completely installed. You get a solid beep there. Once it hits 100%, you'll hear that solid beep for about 5 seconds, and then it will reboot itself. And then once it's booted up, your firmware update is done. Okay, now we're going to update the firmware on the transmitter. So I've got another SD card here and formatted it. Gave it a name of CADDXFPV TX. You can name it whatever you want, just so they can recognize the card. And then make sure it's formatted in blank like this. And then we're going to open the avatar folder. Go to firmware, and then go to the firmware for your transmitter. Mine is Avatar Moonlight Sky. Again, you want to make sure you open the README file and find the device that you're wanting to install the firmware for. And in my case, it's the Avatar Moonlight Sky for that transmitter. So we'll go ahead and copy that file the same way we did with the goggles. And then we will paste that into the SD card for the transmitter. Alright, then I'll go ahead and eject that and put it into the transmitter. Okay, I've got the card in the transmitter. I've got my jumper wire on here. You'll see that in your package. Make sure that the white wire lines up with the white dot down there. And then the white wire on the top will be on the same side. In this case, it's going to be closer to the left on the side of the antennas. Yours may be different, but make sure you read your instructions to make sure you get the right one. But in this case, it's a little white dot that lines up with the white wire. And then I've got my hot and ground hooked up to battery. So I'll go ahead and power that up with my little switch here. And then we're going to find this little needle guy that we used in the goggles. We're going to use it on this one as well. And there's going to be a little pairing button. I can get this camera to focus right below the flashing light. So we'll go ahead and push that for 8 seconds, just like we did the goggles. I can do this with one hand. Okay, I turned the light on here so we could see better. Alright, just go ahead and push that button in for 8 seconds. Press and hold. 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, 4 1000, 5 1000, 6 1000, 7 1000, 8 1000. Okay. Yeah, this should turn off a couple times, but you should see red lights flashing on the top and the VTX alternatively. You shouldn't see any blue lights. If you see blue lights, it means your cable is not plugged in on the other side. So to make sure they're red only. And once it's installed, it should be about 50 seconds according to the instructions. Once it's installed, now you got solid blue. Let's hope that's not bad news. And once it's done, it should be green. There we go, green. And the bottom one will flash, or it'll be solid if it's connected to your goggles, but my goggles are turned off, so it's flashing. So that means the update is done, so we're good. Okay, and to verify the firmware updates have been done successfully, you can go to your goggles, go to settings, and then go down to device. Device info. And there we go. It's the 384313 and the 384313 on the transmitter as well.